There is a vast difference between being annoyed by something and being triggered by it. A few analogies to consider are the huge difference between a mild headache and a migraine, or a stubbed toe and a broken leg. Being triggered is not being soft. It is responding to a thing that is outside of your control in a very poor way. The state of being triggered is being emotionally overwhelmed. Being in a triggered state shuts down parts of your brain, which can interfere with creating cognitive solutions, managing behaviours, and feeling safe or doing reality checking. Things that can cause triggers are sensory stimuli overload, traumatic memory flashbacks, or a situation that prompts a negative thought loop, such as something someone else says or does, the return of a damaging thought pattern, or a situation that stimulates foreboding and feelings of doom. There are three major categories that we're going to put triggering into. One, walking into a known situation that can be triggering. Two, living with a trigger, such as at the home or in the workplace. Or three, an unexpected trigger, such as a flashback or surprise stimuli or surprise situation. Preparation. While it isn't always possible to prepare, when you can, it can prevent a great deal of distress, allow for greater options, and give you the opportunity to stack the odds in your favour. Knowing the triggers. First of all, it is important to know what your triggers are. This allows you to be less of a victim to them. For autistic people, these are frequently sensory triggers that can overload the processing centres and create a meltdown. Sights, sounds, touch, smell, and taste. For people who have experienced trauma, sensory experiences that mimic phenomena that return you to the trauma can be your trigger. Self-management is mostly about mood and behaviour. Become accustomed to noting your mood. Generally consider it out of 10, where under 3 is mostly background emotions. 3 to 5 is regular but notable mood. 6 to 8 is a heightened mood, and 9 to 10 is the extreme upper end, where you must do something to either self-manage or manage your surroundings. If you're going to go into a likely triggering place and your mood is higher than 3, it is worth taking a few moments to calm down. We have discussed calming down before. Check for a link. If your mood is higher than 5, then perhaps consider abandoning your plan to go there. You aren't in the right state of mind. No one can make you behave in a certain way. They can ask you to change with varying levels of strength, but if you don't choose to do so, then you aren't doing it. Behaviour is a choice, and up until your mood level is 8, you can choose your behaviours, even if that behaviour is to do nothing. The higher your mood becomes, the harder it is to make wise choices. But unless there is a clear and present danger to yourself, you can always choose to do nothing. If you feel that your behaviour is likely to harm yourself or others, if the threat is ongoing, you can choose to leave. Consider how long you are going to stay in a triggering place or situation. The less tolerant you are to the trigger, the shorter the time period should be. This can be anywhere from a few minutes up to a couple of hours for most people, depending on your sensitivity and the nature of the trigger. Having an exit strategy is a wise thing. Consider the reason that you may give to someone to explain that you are leaving early, and if needed, ensure that that excuse can be backed up. Look for your exits to get away from a situation. Ensure that your phone is charged or that you have a charge cable available for grabbing some extra power. Have a friend you can call if you need to. Knowing that you can escape decreases the feelings of being trapped, which can lead to being able to withstand the situation for longer. And a way of explaining desensitization is this. A horror film is supposed to be scary, but on the 100th time that you watch the same film, it's become boring. Some things, though, cannot be desensitized to because it is just too triggering. and attempts to desensitize to it make it worse each time. Or the particular sensory trigger is not a thing that can be desensitized to. If the trigger is rare, or it is very hard to desensitize to, or the process of desensitization may cause more harm than good, then perhaps desensitization is not the right method for you. During the event. During the event, note your mood as we covered earlier. During the situation, your mood will rise. If it peaks at 7 or below, you can endure the situation for a time. Keep in mind that time limit we talked about earlier. If you find yourself venturing into 8 or above, you need to switch to self-management mode and or consider exiting. A mood check is important to work out what our emotional bias is. You've probably heard that you shouldn't go shopping when you're hungry, and a similar idea is that you should be aware when your mood is affecting your judgment. Is your mood fear, anger, disgust, joy, or something else? How does that mood change the thing that you are experiencing? Is it accurate in both type of mood and the scale of the mood? What would the calm you think about this situation? Your agitated mood can turn a molehill, that is a minor thing, into a mountain, the illusion of a big thing. Emotional you has less cope than calm you, so be aware that your emotional fuse is shorter. What is everyone else doing? If many people are distressed, then your mood is probably about right. If most people seem fine, then you are falsely triggering. What are the facts of the matter? Are you in danger or are you safe? If it is danger, it should be obvious. And if it is not obvious, then it is not imminent. So you have time to calm down and solve this. So, for now, you are safe. What was the trigger? Was it a stimulus, a memory, a situation, or something else? Was it a one-off, or is it going to repeat? If it is a one-off, calm down and continue. You've survived it. If it is going to repeat, is it best to brace or escape? The trigger has a solution or a management strategy. We need to frame the problem as solvable. If it can be solved and the resources are not a limiting factor, what would that solution be? You may need to reconsider the scope of your solution. For example, instead of making it not rain anywhere, how can you not make it rain on you? Consider what resources you currently have to achieve this solution, and consider what resources you need that you don't currently have access to. How do you use the resources you have to get the resources you don't? Can this be solved now, or will this take preparation time? If it needs preparation, you will need to endure it for now and bring a solution to next time. Are you thinking about this the wrong way? If we have framed the problem as impossible, too big, having to be this way, or the trigger means this, or the only response to that trigger is that, then we have trapped ourselves into an impossible situation. Sometimes we are so invested in it being a problem that we have exaggerated how impossible to solve and address it is. Sometimes asking someone else's opinion on the thing can give you some important perspective, and that unsolvable problem becomes solvable or manageable, perhaps reducing the size of the effect. We don't factor in people too far away, only near yourself, so change that range of care. For example, I don't mind what some random person on another continent is doing right now, nor do I mind what people in the next building are doing. I do care about what is going on in this room, and in this example, perhaps the room is very large, filled with a lot of people. Rather than caring about what that person over there in that corner is doing, if I shift my range down to only a few meters or yards, then that will decrease the number of people that I'm trying to factor into my calculations. And it's so much simpler. Sometimes we become invested in the trigger as the only thing to focus on when we can shift it. How do you manage other triggers? Will that trick work for this? An audio trigger can be very penetrating and disruptive to thought, reducing your cope and spoons down significantly. Note how that sound makes your head feel. Where does it feel like that? Will the repeated stimulus hit the same spot? Can you shift it? Or a memory trigger might be very encompassing and disruptive, and while you pause to manage its effect on you, count how many memory triggers have occurred in this location. Become more interested in how many times it has happened than that it is happening. The shifting of your focus can reduce the debilitating effects the trigger can have on you. Keep in mind, while you are spending attention on this, you can't do as many other things that you would normally be able to do if there was no trigger. But self-managing is better than not managing at all. So try these mind tricks. If you cannot reframe the trigger or problem, it will have to be managed. Triggers that cannot be directly solved may be adapted around. For example, if you find certain sounds irritating and you can't stop the source of the sound, you may be able to either avoid the location, use earbuds, or a headset to mute the sound. Or you can put your hands over your head as you pass through. Some of these are workarounds, some adapt specifically to the location, and some are temporary patches to a temporary problem. This strategy can be used on most stimuli. Sometimes bringing or using a support person helps. Another frequent support item is a fidget device, a distracting something on the phone, or using grounding techniques to bring the attention to another thing. Finding something to distract yourself with can be as simple as coins in your pocket, playing with a fold of fabric in your clothing, finding objects that match each colour of the rainbow, counting in threes or sevens, detecting subtle odours, having two characters from a fictional world meet each other in your mind, and so on. While the trigger source still exists, you can manage better as it has less effect because of this adaptation and management plan. You may just have to put up with the trigger. However, knowing it is coming allows you to take actions to minimize the impact of the trigger, which may include hearing protection, wearing gloves, bringing a cloth with a pleasing odor on it, and so forth. Sometimes you just need to brace yourself and wait until it is done. Remember to try to keep exposure to these things brief and allow yourself an exit plan. After the braced exposure, allow yourself time to wind down, relax, and regather yourself. Avoid jumping from the frying pan into the fire. This is from one triggering place to another. Being triggered can frequently reduce the amount of socialization you can manage. Unexpected trigger. We can't always anticipate a trigger, whether it is a stimulus we don't expect or a flashback without warning. We are triggered and struggling to manage the situation we are in. If you have a support person, let them know that this has happened. If it is safe to do so, pause for a moment. If it is not safe to freeze, get to a place that is safe to pause. Check to ensure you are currently safe. You will know that you are safe because nothing is obviously attacking you. If you are not safe, then you need to address that so that you become safe. Take a long and deep breath. Hold it for about 4 seconds and then let it go slowly. Repeat a few times if necessary to decrease your mood. Identify what happened. If it was a sensory stimulus, what was it? If it was a flashback, recognize that that is in the past and not the present. It can't physically affect you, but it can feel awful. Was it something else? Perhaps it can't be identified right now and you need to reflect on this later. Manually replace any negative thoughts you may have with a positive one. Ideally, you will have a list of replacement thoughts worked out in advance, but if not, try to remember the flavour of a food you like or the sound of a song that you like. Take another deep breath. Hold it for a moment and let it go. If you can get back to what you were doing, then use that as a distraction. If what you were doing was triggering you, check the previous sections for how to manage that better by reframing, adapting, and defending. Or consider doing something else if you can. If you can't return to what you were doing and it isn't critical to someone else's life right now, then stop doing it, unless this is part of your therapy and you have a relevant support person. This has been a brief guide to managing triggers. These aren't the only techniques, and they are pretty generic to common trigger problems. Please look up more and consider connecting to a professional who can help. Thank you for your time.